Recording. Did y'all see the notice that the recording started? All right, very good. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the 2024 Open Texas Conference. I'm glad you could join us this last session of the afternoon. Advance here. The Open Texas Conference is sponsored and convened by two cooperating organizations. We have the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, which is the state agency that serves as a resource, partner, and advocate for Texas higher education in the state. And the Texas Digital Library, a library consortium providing services that enable free and open access to scholarly, cultural heritage, and educational materials. My name is Ken Carrigo, and I'm a STEM librarian at Baylor University, and I will be serving as your moderator this afternoon. We welcome you to introduce yourself and ask questions in chat. Please feel free to turn on your webcam, but please mute your mic unless you're speaking. Also, please be aware that we are recording the session today. Recorded sessions will be available within the conference attendee hub for 30 days. And following the 30 days, the recordings will be accessible through the Open Texas YouTube repository. I'll be adding the link to that YouTube channel in the chat in just a minute. I will also place a link to the conference code of conduct in chat for your information. And I'm going to stop my share here. And all right, so this session is titled Open Pedagogy Collaborations, Providing Sustainable Support to Enhance Student Success. Thank you all for joining us today, and I will now turn it over to Kate and Ariana so we can get started. Ladies, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Ken, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited for our presentation today, Open Pedagogy Collaborations, Providing Sustainable Support to Enhance Student Success. My name is Ariana Santiago, and I'm the head of Open Education Services at the University of Houston Libraries.
And my name is Kate McNally Carter, and I'm an Open Educational Resources Librarian, also with University of Houston Libraries.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. To give an overview of our presentation and what we'll be talking about today, we'll start with a brief introduction to Open Pedagogy and a little bit more about us. Then we'll be sharing details about two Open Pedagogy assignments that we've collaborated with a faculty member to support here at UH. And these collaborations led us to think about how we can ensure that we're approaching open pedagogy support in a sustainable way. So we'll share two major outcomes of that, which are a service model that articulates how we support open pedagogy and reusable online learning objects that we can integrate into our support. We'll then share some of our takeaways and lessons learned from our experiences so far. And then we should have plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end of the presentation. Okay, so to get started with that introduction, we want to start by actually giving a little bit more background on who we are and where we're coming from into this conversation. So Kate and I are both in the Open Education Services Department at the University of Houston Libraries. And this is a relatively new department that was formed close to 2 years ago and currently consists of the two of us. So we are the Open Education Services Department here presenting today. And we take a pretty comprehensive approach to supporting open education across campus. So that includes supporting the adoption of OER and affordable course material, the adaptation and creation of open learning material, and supporting the implementation of open pedagogy. And prior to becoming a department, UH did already have an OER program, which formed in 2018 and that I led in my previous position. And that program started with a strong focus on textbook affordability, though pretty quickly shifted to also meet faculty needs around creating and customizing course material. However, it took us a little bit longer to get to the point of doing any activity around open pedagogy. And a significant reason behind that was the limited capacity to do so. Though about 2 years ago, things aligned in a way that we were able to really explore open pedagogy and start doing things in this area. That's when Kate came on board at UH. So we had that increased staffing capacity for open education support broadly. We also had interest from a faculty member who wanted to incorporate an open pedagogy assignment, and it just made sense within our overall goals and directions. And so that opportunity was there, and it was something that we wanted to pursue and incorporate into our services, but we also wanted to make sure that we went into it with an eye towards feasibility and long-term sustainability. So we've now, close to 2 years later, supported 5 unique assignments in collaboration with 3 different faculty members, and that's including some that are in progress this semester. So we've given a little bit more background on us, but to make sure that everyone here is on the same page, we of course want to share our definition of open pedagogy. And there are several different definitions out there. Though when we talk about open pedagogy, we're talking about the practice of engaging with students as creators of information rather than simply consumers of it. And it's a form of experiential learning in which students demonstrate understanding through the act of creation. And the products of open pedagogy are student created and openly licensed so that they may live outside the classroom in a way that has an impact on the greater community. And this is a really powerful aspect of open education that actively engages students and centers the value of their knowledge and experiences by inviting them to share the products of their work with others. We also use the more specific understanding of renewable assignments, and this is in contrast with disposable assignments, which are assignments that are only ever seen by the instructor when they're graded or maybe they give feedback on the assignment, but otherwise they're thrown away after they're completed. So instead, a renewable assignment gives student work an opportunity to live beyond the classroom and benefit others as well. So with renewable assignments, students are asked to create a new artifact that could be anything from an essay to a poem, video, song, or something else, or they might be revising or remixing an existing OER. And that new artifact has value beyond supporting the learning of its author. And students are invited to publicly share their artifacts, and they're invited to openly license their new artifacts. So that's how we typically describe open pedagogy with faculty.
Okay, so I'm going to take over by talking briefly about our history of supporting open pedagogy and specifically supporting our initial pilot projects with open pedagogy. So we first piloted our open pedagogy support in fall of 2022, as Ariana mentioned, shortly after I came on board. And we piloted this support with a faculty member who was teaching Tales of East Asian Cities, which is a course in our College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. So the initial conversations with the faculty member began in the summer of 2022 and then continued periodically throughout the fall semester. We had a total of 4 separate meetings with the instructor to collaborate on the assignment development process. So in addition to the time that we met with the instructor, Ariana and I also set aside several hours throughout the semester for planning time just between the 2 of us to prepare for the instruction sessions that we taught for the course. And then we also had another meeting with an experienced librarian who helped us by providing their materials and advice for supporting open pedagogy assignments. In addition to all that, we also had a few hours scheduled with our teaching and learning team to collaborate on a library session that they taught with us. So there were several hours worth of time that were invested in kind of the planning for this particular assignment. So we taught a total of 6 library-led instruction sessions, most of which were led by Ariana and myself on various topics that I'll cover more in a later slide. 22 students were enrolled in the course, and each of those students had access to their own Pressbooks account, which Ariana and I administered over the semester. So to give you an overview of what the assignment entailed, students were put into groups based on 6 major East Asian cities, such as Taiwan, Tokyo, Hong Kong, etc. Each student wrote a chapter covering background information on that city, covering topics like history of the city, politics, the economy, religions, tourist attractions, and so forth. So each student, in addition to that, also wrote their own critical analysis essay on a topic of cultural significance for that particular city. So many students wrote analyses about films from their cities, and some students also chose other topics of cultural significance, such as Tokyo's work culture and the preservation of the Cantonese language in Hong Kong. Student choice was a really important aspect of the project that we emphasized throughout the semester. So we used a student agreement form that helped us capture students' choices about whether or not their work would be published in the final OER. And if they chose to publish their work, they could also select which open license would be applied and how they would be credited or how their name would appear on the work. So because students worked on their own individual chapters, we could really easily indicate which chapters needed to be published and how they would be licensed. We could also change how the name of each student was displayed on the chapters. So students could use some form of their name or their full name. They could also choose a pseudonym. And we also had some students who elected to remain anonymous. So just to give you a brief overview of the library sessions that we taught for this course, here's a kind of a list of all of the different topics that we explored. So in our first session, we provided an introduction to open publishing, which included a discussion about student author rights and responsibilities, as well as their risks and rewards associated with open publishing and open licensing. The next session was an introduction to Pressbooks workshop, where we had students log into their accounts and do some editing activities to get them comfortable with the platform. For the third session, we collaborated with our teaching and learning department, and they led a session about finding OER and other library resources. So this also included some discussion about deciding when to reuse or adapt existing OER and when to create new content for their assignment. So we followed this up with our fourth session, and that provided an overview of citing and attributing the different sources that students would be incorporating into their chapters. So later this semester, we had 2 dedicated workshop sessions, one focused on identifying additional research needs and helping students locate resources, and another that allowed us time for students to transfer their content into Pressbooks and to answer any last-minute questions they had about formatting and other needs that they had for their chapters. So that was fall 2022. So the following semester in spring of 2023, the instructor wanted to expand her use of open pedagogy to another course that she was teaching, Chinese popular culture. So this course was a little different in that instead of it being face-to-face, it was an online asynchronous course. So we had 2 consultations with the instructor to help her prepare the assignment and discuss logistics of the course. And then we adapted our instructional approach for the asynchronous modality. So instead of in-person class sessions, we created 4 customized videos that were tailored to the assignment. These replicated much of the content that we had delivered previously in person, but these were adapted into short videos that targeted what students would need to know for the project. And then we created, so we also created Pressbooks accounts for each of the 27 students enrolled in the course. And on top of that, we were also embedded in the Canvas LMS so that we could communicate directly with the students about the assignment. And just to give you an overview of this different assignment, so for this one, each student defined a total of 3 terms commonly used in Chinese popular culture that would essentially go into this Chinese popular culture dictionary. So these could be terms that were used in social media, terms related to celebrities, or different media like movies, television, or video games, and so forth. So the terms were written out as dictionary definitions into separate chapters that we then alphabetized according to their English translation. So the first semester, they created volume 1 of the dictionary, and in subsequent semesters, this assignment has been repeated in new volumes. So students are, in subsequent semesters, students have been allowed to adapt previous content if its license allows, and it must be attributed and adapted substantially from the original. So a couple of important insights emerged for us while working with these two different courses. So first, it was really important for us to establish some parameters around our support for open pedagogy. So piloting open pedagogy support was a significant learning experience for us, and a lot of time was involved in various aspects of our support, especially at the beginning. It was really important for us to consider the scope of what we offered so that we would be able to scale these services in a sustainable way. So as a result, we realized we needed a service model that we could use as a resource for defining our scope of support. So another related takeaway for us was the importance of sustainability for open pedagogy support. So supporting open pedagogy in multiple course modalities prompted us to think about how we could expand the number of courses that we supported. So while I had created some videos that could support the Chinese pop culture course, the first time it was offered, we realized that these would have limited utility over time and with different courses, since they couldn't necessarily be repurposed for different courses. So in order to support open pedagogy over multiple courses and various modalities, we realized that we would need to have new generalized learning objects that could help us scale our services. So we'll talk about these two developments more in depth, starting with our open pedagogy service model.
All right, yes. As Kate mentioned, we developed a service model to define our scope of support for open pedagogy. And that service model is included in a broader document that we call our internal guide for open pedagogy support. So we wanted to give an overview of this as well with some of that additional information that we have in that guide. So that internal guide includes examples of different types of open pedagogy assignments, such as contributing to an open textbook or an open learning object, like the examples we just heard about. But some other types of assignments could be Wikipedia editing or social annotation. It includes background on our overall approach and some special considerations. For example, we include information in this guide about our value of ensuring student agency throughout the process. And we've included some considerations around publishing platforms and assignments that involve group work. And then the internal guide outlines our support for open pedagogy, or what we refer to as our service model. And the three major components of that are consultation, technical support, and instructional support. And I'll describe each of those in more detail in the next few slides. And this is also where we compile links to lesson plans and slide decks that we've developed, and we documented specific workflows and some other details related to the technical support that we may need to refer to in the future when supporting assignments. And then lastly, the guide includes additional resources that we can refer to or that we could direct faculty to for more information. Essentially, this document gathers all of our information on how we support open pedagogy, and it's a living document that we update as we learn more or make changes. So now we'll share that service model that outlines our support. And for each type of support, there are a few different topics or subcategories, a brief description of each activity, and an estimate of how many hours each activity would take. So here we're seeing the support that we provide through consultations. And for consultations, project planning is a major part of that. And this is when we discuss the project goals, the project plan, and feasibility. We'll also discuss with the faculty member any technical and instructional support that's needed for the course, as well as any other resources that might be needed, as well as the duration for the project. So project planning is a pretty big part of this. In our consultations, we also discuss the importance of ensuring student agency throughout the open pedagogy assignment. So we establish the procedure for that student agreement form and ensure that students are fully informed about the open publishing nature of the project, as well as that students will have the ability to opt out of publishing their work openly or be able to complete an alternative assignment if they're not comfortable with putting their work out there. And this is an opportunity to advise on open licensing as well. For example, whether students will opt in to a predetermined open license for the finished product, or if students will be able to select their own preferred open license for their individual contributions. And lastly, on this slide, we've added a syllabus review step. So this is where we review and provide feedback on the syllabus and or the assignment language to help maximize the clarity of that communication to students as well. In terms of the technical support, some of that relates to ensuring student agency because we create the student agreement form, provide students with the link to the form, keep track of who's completed it, and also compile the results in a way that we can see if any follow-up questions are needed about students' responses on that student agreement form. So that's some of the technical support. But we also provide some direct technical support for the use of the Pressbooks publishing platform. So as you can see here, we create students' accounts, which involves emailing each student with the login information and resources. We create the web book for the course in Pressbooks and determine the book settings and add students and the faculty member as contributors to the book. We apply licenses, student names, or other publication preferences to the chapters in Pressbooks, and assist with the webbook wrap-up and publication, which includes finalizing metadata and submitting the finished work to our institutional repository. And you'll notice that we only offer this type of support for Pressbooks and not other publication platforms, of which there could be many different options. And this is because we already provided Pressbooks and have experience supporting creators with using it. So what we've outlined here fits within what's feasible for us when supporting open pedagogy assignments that are using Pressbooks. However, we're not offering technical support for other potential platforms because we're simply not technical experts on everything and not able to troubleshoot for the wide variety of tools that are out there. And the last major category here is instructional support. So for our instructional support, we've developed 3 lesson plans based on our early experiences with those Chinese culture classes. So each of these are a separate class session, and they build upon each other and can be adapted for different class assignments. So the first session focuses on open publishing, author rights, and open licensing. And this is because open pedagogy is often new to students. So we want to be able to talk about these things and surface any questions that they may have and make sure they've been introduced to the information that will help them make decisions about how to participate in the assignment, such as which license to apply to their work or if they prefer not to publish. The second session is only applicable if the assignment will be published on Pressbooks and if students are using Pressbooks directly versus maybe the faculty member or a single person entering all of the content into the platform. And this session gives students hands-on experience using Pressbooks, and we hope eases the technical barrier that some students might encounter when they're being asked to use and learn a new tool. And the third session focuses primarily on attribution and citation. And depending on the assignment, students may be able to adapt existing OER as a part of their new work or incorporate openly licensed images or other media. So we talk about why it's important to cite sources and introduce the idea of providing attribution for OER that they may be incorporating into their work. For the time estimates here, we've included the time of an actual class session and also factored in additional planning time for each class. So it's been really helpful to have these lesson plans ready to go, so we don't have to start from scratch when we do instruction for our class. And we've also adapted them a bit as we've started working with other courses. The instructional support outlined here really centers on in-person synchronous instruction, and it's strongly based on what we developed for that first open pedagogy assignment that we worked with for Tales of East Asian Cities. Though with that mind towards sustainability, we've since expanded our instructional support to include those asynchronous online learning objects that could be applied across a variety of open pedagogy assignments. So I'll turn it over to Kate now to talk about those learning objects.
All right. As Ariana mentioned, sustainability has really been a central factor for us in our approach to open pedagogy support. So creating asynchronous learning objects has met several of our needs and has helped us work towards that. So primarily creating learning objects has really helped us meet the needs of our online and hybrid courses that we support, especially by creating something once with intentional focus on multiple courses and modalities and also different approaches to open pedagogy. This helps prevent us from having to recreate custom learning materials for each semester or each course that we work with. So we can instead focus our attention on scaling our support kind of long term. So some of the resources that we developed have replaced some of the earlier videos that we developed for that Chinese pop culture course that I mentioned earlier. So creating learning objects also presented us a really great opportunity to collaborate with our teaching and learning team. And we benefited a lot from their expertise and their workflows to help us generate materials with a thoughtful and student-centered focus. So I'm going to describe what we've created so far, and as we describe these, we'll drop links in chat for each of these. So our first project was an introductory video that provides a really brief plain language definition of OER. So we felt that this was an important place for us to start, and we also found that it was really helpful to have as a resource both for our faculty as well as students who are engaging in open pedagogy assignments. So it was really helpful for us to start with this particular resource. The next resource we created was a larger project. It was an online lesson called Open Publishing for Students. So this online lesson includes the content that we typically would cover in our first meeting with students to talk about open publishing. So that content related to student rights and responsibilities as authors, and also provides an overview of Creative Commons licensing. So we built this in Rise 360, and it can be embedded in Canvas as a gradable module, which we found is really helpful. And then next, we created a LibGuide to introduce students to Pressbooks for those classes that would be working in Pressbooks. So the LibGuide provides basic instructions on navigating the Pressbooks book dashboard, creating and editing chapters, and adding content to a webbook. It also has some basic information about citing and attributing media, though it doesn't go into a whole lot of depth about that. We initially designed this as an online lesson, also like the previous one that I mentioned, but that would also be built in Rise 360. But we felt that that format really didn't lend itself well for students who would need to reference the content throughout the semester. So we decided that a LibGuide worked better for that purpose. So we're still working on some additional learning objects to help us scale our services. So a couple of projects that we have in development right now. Currently, we're in the early production stages of a new video on Creative Commons licensing. So our goal here is to produce a video that is very brief that we can use also for a variety of audiences. And this one is especially because several of our other departments in our portfolio of research and engagement services, which includes teaching and learning and research services, they also have a need for this type of instructional video. So we're going to be designing this intentionally with all of those audiences in mind. So next, we also have been working on a new online lesson that will cover more in depth how to find, use, and attribute OER. So this is a resource that would be specifically focused on supporting open pedagogy assignments. So it would help us describe why and how students could incorporate existing OER into their open pedagogy assignments and how to properly provide attribution. So we're still in the very early stages of determining what the scope of this lesson is. So this is still very much an ongoing project. All right, so next I will turn it back over to Ariana to start us off with takeaways.
Yeah, so our first takeaway here, there we go, is that a significant time investment can be involved. And this is especially true when you're working with a new project or maybe a new type of assignment where you need to figure things out again or figure things out in a different context. And we've definitely found that to be true. And in our service model, you saw that we have an estimate of how many hours each aspect of our support might involve on our end. And those are not exact, and they're not meant to place a hard limit on how much time we spend on our support. But paying attention to the amount of time that it takes and coming up with those estimates helped us gain that overall sense of the time investment for supporting an open pedagogy assignment, which can also factor into understanding how we can scale this support. There's also a learning curve, especially if you're newer to open pedagogy or newer to providing support for it. I think that's definitely related to the time investment too. And for this reason, we find it's really important to build in that time for consultation with the instructor, especially for any classes where library instruction will be involved so that you can collaboratively plan for those sessions. And building in time for consultation can also help with answering questions about the assignment and even in just allowing enough time to digest and think about the information that ultimately can help shape the assignment itself. We're always considering our capacity, both individually and as a department. And in our open pedagogy support, we found it's helpful to set limits on what we can and what we can't offer. Because if we don't set those limits, there's a risk of things snowballing and just becoming more than we can reasonably take on. And that's what that image of like the cup spilling over is meant to represent. That's what we don't want to be, the cup that's too full and spilling over. So for example, you saw in our service model that we provide some technical support for Pressbooks, but not for other tools or platforms that might be used for open pedagogy assignments like Wikipedia, for example. And that's a limit we felt necessary to set so that we aren't seen as being technical support for any platform. There are also some things that are related to open pedagogy, but that fall outside of our scope. For example, more directly supporting the instructional design for the course would be more appropriate for instructional designers. So there can be those opportunities to make connections with other resources on campus when something is outside of our capacity or scope. In terms of capacity, we're also considering the balance between promoting our support for open pedagogy and scaling it up in a sustainable way. So essentially, we don't want to end up taking on too much before we're ready to. For example, if we put a lot of emphasis on promotion and we get a lot of interest, is that going to be more than we can handle right now? So this is where it can be helpful to try piloting a project with one interested faculty member, maybe someone that you've collaborated with in the past, and have that learning opportunity before scaling things up. So we've defined our support in a certain way where we have an emphasis on consultations, we provide some technical support, and we encourage in-person or online instruction to support students. But there are also other ways to define open pedagogy support, and that would very much depend on different contexts and capacity levels. So these are some possibilities that we were able to think of for what that engagement with open pedagogy might look like that's perhaps different than what we've been talking about today. So there could be a stronger focus on promoting open pedagogy and raising awareness about it among faculty members or across your institution. There are other ways to approach technical support, or maybe to provide more robust technical support than we do. Librarians can closely integrate open pedagogy with existing information literacy instruction or information literacy initiatives. Or you might be well positioned to support the assignment design aspect really well. But no matter what your support looks like, communication is always a really important piece of that. And we found that having our service model that defines our support has enabled us to more clearly communicate how we can support open pedagogy. And that sometimes includes clearly communicating things that do fall outside of our scope, because we have that documented and we can say, here's what we can offer. Unfortunately, this is not something that we do right now. So this definition of your support really helps with the communication aspect too, in our experience.
All right. Another big takeaway for us was the importance of reinforcing student agency throughout the process. So we found that it was essential for us to document students' choices. So I mentioned that we used a student agreement form, and this was a document that we got from a librarian at another institution. And this document was really helpful for us to help us capture and record student choices about whether they wanted to publish their work, how they wanted to license it, and how they wanted to be credited. So it's also really important to reinforce this with faculty during your consultations with them. So just ensuring that the open pedagogy approach is process focused rather than product focused. We really want this to be about the student learning. So having this conversation with faculty is really important, and ensuring that students can opt out of publishing openly without their grade being affected. That's another way that you can just continue to reinforce that importance of that. Another really big takeaway for us was that clear communication with students was really essential, and especially because this is a type of assignment that will be new to them. So it's important to introduce the assignment and also their options early, so that they have some time to think about what works best for them. And then finally, our last takeaway is that, and we realized this early on in the process, that it was really important for us to connect with other experienced librarians. So we found that many librarians are already supporting these types of assignments, and it was incredibly helpful for us to draw from their expertise. So reading scholarship and case studies was also really helpful, but we found that the actual connection with others to be even more beneficial, because they helped us think through different approaches that would work for our specific scenario. So not only was it helpful for us to draw from their resources, but it also introduced opportunities for us to collaborate with other librarians on best approaches for open pedagogy and enhance our own instructional approach. We also saw and benefited from collaborators at our own institution. As I mentioned earlier, with developing learning objects, we were able to draw from the experience and expertise of our teaching and learning librarians. And we found that to be incredibly enriching and rewarding, and also beneficial in creating some really high quality learning objects. All right. So that is the end of our presentation, our prepared presentation, but we do have plenty of time for questions. And then we also have a slide here for references. And just as a reminder, the slides are available in the Open Texas portal, so please feel free to download those. And you can contact us with questions at any time, but we would love to field some questions that you have right now.
Thanks,
I do
Kate
see
and
one.
Ariana.
Oh, thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
I was just seeing that there is one question in the chat already. The question is, what level are these students generally? Are they sophomores, higher, lower? So we can talk about that a little bit. most of the courses we've worked with are undergraduates, and I don't know if I can speak to the specific year that students are in for the most part. Kate, do you remember?
I believe they were all junior level classes. But we are starting to work with additional levels. So last summer we worked with a course that was a graduate course. So that's been a new learning experience for us to kind of bring this to new populations. This semester we'll be working with a freshman course. So that's really exciting to see different ways that different students are engaging with open pedagogy.
It looks
I
like
have
there's a new
that.
question in the chat too about were students graded alongside a rubric for their open pedagogy assignments?
This is a good question. And one that maybe borders on the line of what we see as outside of our specific scope of support in terms of helping an instructor develop the rubric for the assignment. And that's where we would, if they're looking for support in that area, direct them to their instructional designer. Though we certainly know that for assignments we've worked with, there are rubrics for at least some of the assignments that come to mind. I don't remember if I've seen all of them, but that's something that has come up in conversation, where questions about the grading rubric has come up, but that's not within our lane of expertise to advise on. Kate, do you think that captures it, or do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I would just say that yes, they were all graded according to a rubric that the instructor provided. And yeah, there were times where instructors have asked us for opinions about grading or the specific rubric, but we've, like Ariana mentioned, we've kind of deferred to them as far as that is kind of their area of expertise. But in general, the rubric could apply for students regardless of whether they chose to publish their work or not. They could still apply the rubric according to just the content that the students turned in. So Megan asked, the library instruction accounted for 6 hours of contact hours of class time, so 3 weeks. Did I understand that correctly? And yes, I believe that's correct.
Yes, and so I'll expand on that a little bit. That was the very first open pedagogy assignment that we supported. And the faculty member was very enthusiastic, of course, and very interested in doing this. This was kind of like our test case of like, let's try this out and learn about this together. And the number of sessions that we did for that class, it kind of seems like a lot. It's more than we would, I think that most libraries usually do for library instruction to support an assignment, though it was from interest from the instructor we were working with of having that collaboration and using the class time in that way. But that's one of the things that kind of led us to start thinking about like, okay, we're not always going to be able to provide that much class time for one assignment. So we started thinking about like, you know, we'll try it out this time and it'll be that learning experience as we're working together and figuring this out, but in the future it would be scaled back. So that's kind of part of our perspective here as well, if that makes sense.
I don't see any new questions coming in. And everyone, you should are invited to unmute yourself to ask a question if you'd like to do that as well. In the meantime, I'll ask one. You may have mentioned it and I just missed it. The curriculum you used in setting up all this, you had all these multiple sessions. Was that based on a pre-existing thing? Is it something that is shareable for anyone who's looking to establish a similar program or revamp their existing practices?
Sorry, Kate, I was waiting to see if you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe you would.
So our initial sessions, the sessions that we now have developed, those lesson plans and templates, were heavily influenced by what was shared with us from another librarian. I'll go ahead and share who it was because they were super helpful. Laura Ray at the University of Washington. We met with them to learn about their experience with supporting open pedagogy, and they shared with us some of their, if I'm remembering this right, they shared with us their kind of like class session templates, and then we adapted those with that permission to do so. And I think we would be happy to share our templates with anyone who's interested. If you know, feel free to reach out to us and we'll send you the links.
All right. We still have plenty of time if anyone else wants to jump in with more questions. I don't see anyone with their hand raised. Well, what I'll do then is I'll leave the room open just for a little bit longer. If Kate and Ariana are willing to hang around, that way, if anybody's been shy and wants to wait until the room's a little less crowded to speak up, we've had that opportunity. Otherwise, I thank everyone for coming. Last session of the day, so appreciate all of you making it in. Oh, I see Rita has her hand up.
Hi, I'm on my phone, so it took me a while to find the raise hand button. I'm wondering, do you have stats on how many students decided to publish in Pressbooks? How many students decided to publish by Creative Commons but not in Pressbooks, and how many students decided to remain anonymous, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we do keep track of all of that information. I would say that for our Pressbooks projects, students either choose to publish in Pressbooks or they choose not to publish. So they don't necessarily publish their work with an open license, but outside of the platform. Or if they do, we don't know about it because they're publishing it on their own. But yeah, I would say we don't necessarily have that all like compiled somewhere, but we do have kind of in our documents, our documentation of student choices, we do have that kind of recorded as far as like the number of students who chose to remain anonymous and pseudonyms and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, I think we just don't know the numbers off the top of our head, and maybe that's something that we could like make a consolidated list of for the future. I'd say anecdotally, most students do have published their work on Pressbooks, but a fair amount have chosen to do so anonymously or under a pseudonym, and some have chosen to not publish their work online at all, but they turn in the same assignment, but just don't publish it openly on Pressbooks.
Okay, so if they decide not to publish it, that means you also cannot publish it on Pressbooks, the instructor, right? So they have to give permission for their work to be used.
Yeah, and that's what we've worked to build into it with any assignments that we support, is to make sure students have that choice and that they're able to maybe do the same assignment, but just not publish it openly and then like not have any penalty for that. Like that wouldn't affect their grade.
Right.
Or maybe if there's an option where the instructor wants to say, if you don't want to do this open publishing assignment, here's another alternative assignment that you could do for the same amount of credit, you know. I don't think anyone we've worked with has done that yet, but it's more of a publish it online or do the same thing, but just turn it in normally.
Well, what if somebody, this is my last question. What if if a student wants to publish their work because, you know, they want to put it on their resume, have an artifact or whatnot, but you find the quality is not sufficient to publish it?
Yeah, so that's a question that we've actually had from our faculty members as well. And so we have talked to them about, you know, working with the students to kind of build that process into like that kind of quality check into the grading. So maybe they submit something in stages so that there's a chance for feedback to be incorporated into the creation of that artifact. Another thing is we've also indicated that, faculty can communicate to students that there will be some kind of editorial check or like authority for that the instructor has to go back and make those revisions if they find that there maybe needs to be some changes regarding like grammar or something. But we don't have we don't take a very heavy hand with that kind of thing, just because again, it's just that level of scope for us to check all of the student work. Then we would essentially have to be going in and grading, not really grading, but essentially doing a lot of the work of the grading process. And so we really rely on our faculty members to kind of make that judgment.
Right. So I've taken the second approach where I've let them know that I will review before publishing their work as the instructor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely shouldn't be on your shoulders. Yeah. Thank you very much. That was very helpful.
Thank you for the questions.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Well, if not, just want to remind everyone that we do have a discussion board called Keep on OER Talkin' Texas and Beyond in the attendee hub. So we're encouraging everyone to keep the conversation going. The whole point of this is for us to learn from each other, network, and build together. So I'm going to stop the recording now. And thank you again to